Welcome. Hope you guys don't mind. I've made myself comfortable today. Trying to wrap up the semester. I think we've got pretty much everything under control so far. Should be sending finals to the testing center next week. I put it on a note in an announcement. It works out best for everyone. The earlier you can take it, the better. I know you guys have busy schedules, so by all means, if you can't make it before Thursday, Friday, I get it. But the sooner you do, the sooner you get to know your grade, and the sooner I can grade it, and it just kind of works out better for everyone that way. Um, I'm gonna end up doing social psych today, as well as psychological disorders. So hang with me for that. Most of what I'm going to be doing today, um, probably going to be pulling more from the PowerPoint, just because both of these chapters do have a lot of material. I think I cover almost all of it pretty well. Um, with social psych, there are some things that I don't cover as much. That can actually be really useful, like the persuasion techniques and stuff like that. But I just want you guys to be aware of those, not going to be testing on those. So I just wanted to kind of touch base on that. Social psych. So one of the big questions and one of the things that I tried to make sure was in your quiz was talking about the difference between social psychology and sociology. With sociology, you're looking at groups of people. With sociology, you're still looking at the individual. What you're looking at, though, is how the people they're around is going to affect their behavior, thoughts and feelings kind of associated with being in that group. It's not looking at the group as a whole, which is a little bit more of what sociology does. Um, so sociology examines the individual, whereas sociology examines groups of people. And I just repeated it verbatim, but it's what's on the PowerPoint slide. So hope that helps. Attributions. So why things are the way that they are. Why do we do the things that we do? And we have dispositional attributions and we have situational attributions. Dispositional attributions are you attribute it to the person. It's part of who they are. It's part of their personality. It's the person. It's not the situation. It's nothing like that. It is all about the person. And so they do the things that they do because it's them. With situational attributions, this is a lot of what factors into social psych. Sorry, getting comfortable here. I'm going to be here for a minute. Um, with situational attributions, it is that people are who they are, but the way that they act and the things that they do is going to be dictated by the situation. Um, I tend to be who I am most of the time. People that know me personally know that I'm fairly consistent through situations, but I can't go strolling into my boss's office like, "Yeah, what up, homie?" And it's gonna be like, "Did she hit her head? What happened to her?" Um, you're always you, but the side of you that you let other people see is what changes. And situations dictate what side of you let people see. So, and that's what attributions are all about. So, I'm gonna start with the heavy, um, the bystander effect. So, um, a long time ago, there was a lady named Kitty Genovese. Kitty Genovese was a waitress, and she actually got stabbed. She left the restaurant where she worked, and she was heading home. Um, and she was murdered outside of her apartment. And lots of people heard it. Some people even saw it. It was not like it was quiet. Um, but even though people bore witness to it, they didn't help her. And that's what we attribute to the bystander effect. The bystander effect says that the more people there are around, the less likely we are to help. And it's because of this phenomenon, it's called the diffusion of responsibility. Diffusion of responsibility says, well, yeah, I see this, I hear this, and I should help, but other people are hearing and seeing it too, so they can help. I'll just get in the way. You kind of push that responsibility up on other people who may or may not actually help. Um, but it's kind of a way or a rationale for you to not help either. So, um, and all of this, the helping behavior has to do with something called altruism. Altruism is your desire to help someone or assist someone without the expectation of being repaid for it. You want to just do it because you're a good person and you like helping people. And that's what altruism is. Whenever I was an undergrad, I actually took part, helped running an altruism study where we would have people in a room and say, hey, here in this room, here, take this test. If you leave, it invalidates your results, so you have to stay here until I come back. But here you go. And then we gave them a decoy test. We'd go in the next room and pretend that we'd fallen. We'd throw things around, make it sound like we crashed. Got really fun sometimes. But the thing is, you were looking to see if they were going to invalidate the test to come help people. So, it was a pretty cool study, but that's altruism. That's altruistic behavior, helping other people. Um, just checking the book and comparing here. Kitty Genovese, that happened in 1964. No, that's not going to be on the test. I just said a long time ago. Um, but yeah. Let's see. Happened at 3 a.m. Slayer took 30 minutes to kill Genovese. 38 neighbors watched and heard, and no one helped or called the police. Sad, guys. But this is still the kind of world that we live in, too. So, except now, instead of not helping, now we pick up smartphones and record it. So, that's kind of compounded to the bystander effect. Pretty interesting question there, too. I mean, how has technology and social media affected our helping behavior? I showed a video not too long ago to another class of a girl on a train who was taken off of the train because she put her foot on the seat. I have no doubt in my mind that the person filming it thought that they were helping her, but at the same time, it's not like, I don't know. I guess it was helping, but I guess we have different ways of helping now. I don't know. Something to think about. Anyway, social cognition, the area of social psychology that explores how people select, interpret, remember, and use social information. Alright, so here we go. This is on page 423, by the way. I put 423 on the slide. Sorry, it's actually 432. My dyslexia kicked in a little bit there. So, stereotypes. Widely held beliefs that people have certain characteristics because of their membership in a particular group and ignores individual differences. I'm willing to bet that almost everyone here has heard of stereotypes before. And the thing is, they come from somewhere for a reason, and what it is that you may know one member of a particular group, so you just assume that everybody in that group is going to be the same way, which is not true. You completely ignore individual differences and just say, oh well, Dross is a teacher, she must be nerdy, she must be a nerd, she must read a lot. Well, you'd be right. It's a true stereotype, I do. But it's not safe to assume that just because I'm a teacher, I read a lot. I know plenty of my colleagues, actually a lot of people in general, read a statistic that 50% of people don't pick up a book after college. So sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But being aware of them allows us to challenge them and eliminate bias. So, self-fulfilling prophecy. This is something where you hear something, so you start behaving in a way to make it true. The really unfortunate part of this, abusive relationships, self-fulfilling prophecy. Um, I'm gonna go with your typical what people think of whenever they think of an abusive relationship. They tend to think of a man and a woman, with a man being the abuser and the woman being abused. I'm stereotyping here, um, but go with me on it for a second. Um, the man may tell the woman, "You're hopeless. You're worthless without me. You screw up everything." Well, obviously, the things that that person says makes an impression. So the woman may find herself making more mistakes than usual. Why? Because that's what she's being told. So, whether she knows it or not, she may act in a way to make that true. Another example may be a teenager. How many teenagers have parents who don't encourage them or don't support them and tell them, "You're constantly screwing up. I don't know how you'll ever make it in this world." And then boom, next thing you know, they're suspended. They're acting out. They're doing XYZ, these horrible things. And then, the parents get even angrier. Well, you told them that they were a screw up all along. What did you expect them to do? You can't be surprised that their behavior changed to meet the expectation. Now, whether this is always conscious or, kind of subconscious, unconscious, depending on what level of Freud you want to hit here, um, we're not always aware of this. You know, um, a lot of times this happens without us even realizing it. So, um, Freud, for all of his errors and mistakes and kookiness, um, you know, sometimes our unconscious does play on our actions, and I think the self-fulfilling prophecy is one of those. Um, so I think that's pretty well covered there. Attributions, we talked a little bit about this already. Situational and dispositional, whether you blame the situation or whether you blame the person. Um, Going along with this, I want to talk about the Stanford Prison experiments. Okay. Um, I think there's a video put on here a little bit later about it, conducted by Philip Zimbardo. He also wrote a book called The Devil Within. He has written textbooks. He's a big name in our world. Okay. Um, and what he did was he conducted a study. He made a mock prison. He took college students and said, "Hey, I need you to be part of this study. We'll pay you $15 a day." Keep in mind, this was the 70s, so that was a pretty good amount of money. $15 a day, well above minimum wage. Said, you just need to come to this study. And he put the people in this mock prison. Some of them were prisoners, some people were prison guards. And what he was looking at is how they behaved. Okay? Now, one of the things he said is, "I want to see what happens, whenever we do this." Because he wanted to know, are people going to step into those roles? Um, and he found that people did very much step into those roles, to an almost, well, to a detrimental point. The study had to be canceled. It was supposed to go for 2 weeks. It did not last that long. I think it was about 5 days. Some of the participants had to go through therapy, had PTSD like symptoms, and some of the guards were borderline abusive. Um, they were depriving the prisoners, keep in mind, just regular college students, depriving prisoners of sleep, humiliating them, delousing them. So, make them strip naked and hose them down with a very high pressure water hose. Um, they were very, very cruel. Prisoners were not called by their name, they were called by their number. So de individuation, and denial of personal identity. And so the big thing here and why it relates to attributions is, were these people bad? Or was this something that happened as a result of the situation that they were put in? Keep in mind, too, whenever they did this, there were multiple psychological screenings that these people had before they became a part of the study. And no one, everyone with potential mental health issues was ruled out. So, that's a kind of a sign, or, that it has more to do with situational attributions than dispositional. So, attribution errors. So your big one is going to be your fundamental attribution error. This is where you assume something about a person, or that a person is acting because of their disposition, or that it's a dispositional attribute, um, rather than evaluating the situation and not thinking about the situation. And one of my favorite examples of this is being in a grocery store. We've all been in a grocery store and had this person who's arguing with a cashier about the price of an item. And, we're always like, we always just perceive them to be difficult. There's kind of a running meme out on the internet with, like, the lady with, like, the short, choppy mom hair, the "can I speak to a manager" type. Um, and we always assume that it's about who they are. And you're like, God, what kind of person has the time to do this? This kind of stuff. Well, put yourself in a different position. Imagine that you're that person. And imagine that your grocery bill is ringing up to 22.13 and you have $20 in your bank account. And because an item's not ringing up on sale, it is making you go into debt to buy groceries, essentially. You don't know what someone's going through. So instead of automatically assuming it's about the person, maybe sometimes assume it's about the situation. Um, and that's just my, is it a realistic thing or a realistic situation? Very rarely is it ever that kind of situation. At least I would like to believe. But it gives us as people an easier way of dealing with it. We don't want to believe that all the people in the world are bad. So this gives us a way to believe that these are still good people and they just have to do bad things. Just world hypothesis. This one's kind of difficult for me to talk about because there's a pretty, tough example of it. A lot of times, whenever bad things happen to people, we're like, oh, they got what they deserve. We want to believe that they're bad people and that's why bad things happen to people, because they're bad people. And that's just not the case sometimes. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to confirm this just world hypothesis. We want to believe that we live in a world where people get what they deserve, so that if you're a good person, you get good things. And if you're a bad person, you get bad things. So hold on. So this idea, Dave got fired because he was lazy. You have a coworker that gets fired, and you want to blame him. And that's not always the case. Sometimes you don't have money to keep people. My biggest one, and this is something that my other class talks about a lot, we have a chapter in our textbook in my CLP class where it talks about sexual assault. And one of my students didn't know that there was kind of this phrase or this belief that she was asking for it, thing. And he's like, I didn't know people thought that. Well, unfortunately they do, and this is an example of an extreme case of the just world hypothesis. Because we don't want to believe that things like this happen to people, but they do. So, it's much easier for us to believe that, these things are provoked or that they happen for a reason than for us to accept that there are these genuinely horrible people in the world and that this is part of what we live with and have to deal with. So, wow, today's is really heavy, isn't it? Sorry. That is how it is sometimes, though. One thing that I kind of don't like about this book is because they do reserve a lot of the heavier material for later on. And I think this provides some really good talking points and could have provided some really good, talking points earlier in the semester. But anyway, too late for all. Self-serving bias. So when good things happen, it's because we're awesome. It's because we worked hard or we deserve it. Whereas when bad things happen, it's, wow, that's a really tough break, or like that's somebody else's fault. So my favorite example is a test. So you show up, you take one of my tests, and you do really well. You're like, yes, I rock. I worked really hard on that. I deserve this A. Woo! Great job. However, you come and take another one of my tests and you fail. And you're like, oh, God, Dross doesn't know what she's doing. She's the worst teacher ever. Whenever you do well, you attribute to you. But whenever things go bad, you blame others. Okay? And that's a self-serving bias. A tendency to attribute personal success to personal characteristics and failure to environmental factors. Maybe it's not that I'm a bad teacher, but oh, well, I didn't sleep well the night before, or I was distracted, or, I just didn't get this material, stuff like that. Um, and then false consensus effect. The This is kind of thinking that everybody is like us. Well, this is what I would do in this situation, so this is obviously what the other person would do, and it doesn't really work that way. Um, if the waiter brought me the wrong food, I would complain. I bet that's what he's going to do. So you see somebody get the wrong food in a restaurant, and you think that, well, I would stand up for myself. I would, get the right one. And so that you think that that's what they're going to do, and then they don't. So, talks a little bit about attitudes, some kind of hot button topics. The big thing that I want to touch on this slide, this is on slide 7. Let me make sure that I'm kind of keeping along. Yep, keeping along with the book. I'm going to come back to stereotype, threat, and self-objectification. Actually, I'm probably not even going to talk about self-objectification a whole lot. It's kind of the whole, like, viewing yourself as a possession, which can be a big problem. But we'll come back to that. Going back to the attitudes, talking about those hot button topics, the one that I really want to talk about, or the issue that I really want to talk about, is cognitive dissonance. Okay, cognitive dissonance is a state of tension that results when behaviors are inconsistent with our attitudes. So, bear with me for a minute. This kind of idea. So you go out one night with a bunch of your friends. One of your friends gets ridiculously drunk, makes a complete idiot out of themselves, and you are ashamed to be seen with them. And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they did this. This is so embarrassing. You're embarrassed for them. You're embarrassed that you know them. Blah, 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 blah. Okay? It's a very humiliating situation. You can't believe that they did that. And you're just ashamed. Well, a month or two later, you do the same thing. And that kind of double standard is cognitive dissonance. That guilt that you would feel for doing what you criticize somebody else for doing is cognitive dissonance. You have your own beliefs, and whenever your actions run counter to those beliefs, that's the state of tension that they're talking about. Another example that's been brought up in class before is people who wait for marriage for sex. That maybe somebody says, yes, I'm going to wait till marriage to have sex, and kind of condemns or guilt other people for doing it, but then they turn around and end up doing the same thing. And that state of tension for doing something that you said that you weren't going to do is cognitive dissonance. Hopefully that makes sense. It's on 438 too. An individual's psychological discomfort caused by two inconsistent thoughts or inconsistent thoughts and inconsistent behaviors. And I remember now that's actually why I didn't use the literal textbook definition, because it's not always two thoughts. Sometimes it's a behavior and a thought. So coming on to I'm skipping self-perception theory. Yeah, I'm doing that. It's not going to be on the test. Feel free to read up on it if you like, but it's not something that I'm assessing on. Persuasion. I think if we talk a little bit more about this later, I think it's just kind of out of order. But But yeah, altruism we've already talked about. Um, Matter of fact, yeah, okay. So, talking about empathy, psychological factors, and pro-social behavior. Um, haven't really talked about that too much, and I'm kind of not gonna. Um, like I said, there's a lot in this, and I kind of want to stay to the stuff that I know I'm gonna test on, and make sure that you really get it. Okay. So that being said, I'm gonna keep going. Um, Conformity and obedience. Um, that we are going to talk about later. Um, for some reason in the PowerPoint, I went straight to stereotyping discrimination. And I think it's because I already kind of talked about it a little bit. So I think I'd prefer to just go back to it real quick and then come back to the new concepts. Um, Conformity and obedience, that's going to be on 446. We are going to come back to that. Give me a minute. Um, so intergroup relations or social influence. Um, yeah, here we go. All right, so page 455, ethnocentrism. The tendency to favor usually one's own or another ethnic race or group, or ethnic group. Um, so, and this is what most people think of whenever they think about discrimination. Whenever, especially I tend to think of hiring practices. The tendency to pick people who are like us, including an ethnic group. And that's ethnocentrism. Um, why I wanted to get to this and our real world application of these academic concepts. Prejudice and discrimination. Real talk here, guys. We live in 2018. It is a volatile world out there. I know you're not living under rocks. I know you know what's going on in the world. I want to help you understand it a little bit better in terms of social psychology. In terms of social psychology, you have prejudice. Prejudice is an attitude or a belief. It is an unjustified negative attitude or belief towards a member of a group who is usually different than you. Um, so thinking again, going back to, well, Dross is a teacher, she must be a nerd. Is that a horrible prejudice? No, I think it's kind of funny. Um, but there are some very real prejudices in the world. Um, and it goes a lot of ways. Um, you know, whenever I was growing up, I was not trust to distrust law enforcement. Um, and so I don't have this prejudice towards law enforcement that many people do have now. The thing is, as years have gone by with media coverage, it has generated a distrust. So there are a lot of people who are prejudiced towards law enforcement because they think they are unfair or that they're not biased. That was never something I had to experience, but again, I'm from a different generation. So I think that's part of it. So with that being said, prejudices can evolve. They can change over time. And whether we want those to change for the better or for the worse depends on the information that's put out and what we choose to believe. Um, so, kind of going along with that, some other prejudices. Trying to think of some examples, but I'm hoping you guys get it. Um, the big point that I'm trying to drive home here is that the prejudice is the attitude or the belief. Okay? Not hiring somebody because of their color or their religious affiliation, that is not a prejudice. That is a discrimination. It is denial of rights or services or goods based on group membership. So, prejudice is the attitude, discrimination is the action. And that's what I'm trying to drive home here. Discrimination is showing favoritism or hostility to others because of their affiliation with a group. And discrimination means treating people differently, right? It's not always negative. Sometimes we favor people, again, who are like us. That's still discrimination. That person may not be complaining about the benefits of it or the outcome of it, but what you've done now is because you've shown favoritism to one particular person, another group member is excluded. And that's where the discrimination part comes in. But again, your big point that I'm trying to drive home here, prejudice is an attitude, discrimination is an action. Stereotype threat. Told you we were coming back to it. Individuals who are aware of others' negative expectations, which leads to the fear that they will be judged or treated as inferior. Um, Lots of minority groups experience this. I can only speak to the one that I relate to. I'm a woman. I understand that people are going to think that, I can't pop the hood on my trunk or on my car. I'm used to, whenever I do pop the hood, oh, do you need help? You know, I know when my battery's dead. I know how to hook up the jumper cables. I got this. Um, but the thing is, that's a stereotype. Stereotype being women don't know anything about cars. Well, stereotype threat is where I try and show off. I know what people are going to think, so as a result, I overcompensate. I start trying harder to fix it on my own without other people's help. Things like that. Um, and again, and I'm only speaking to what I can relate to, being a woman in the workplace. I'm constantly aware of, if I have to call out sick, they're going to be like, oh, well, it's her kid. This is what we get for hiring a woman. And, that plays on the number of sick days that I take because I don't want people to think that it's a boundary to me working. How long did women fight to get in the workforce? And it's like, I don't want to set that back. But do I need to stay home and take care of my kid? Yeah, absolutely. So, stereotype threat is knowing what others are going to think and doing your best to beat that bias. Um, and I know that you guys will know others. If you feel like sharing, by all means, please do. I can only speak to what I relate to, or at least that's all I'm going to do and that's one thing that I was told before I ever started teaching. You're going to learn more from your students than they'll ever learn from you. I know you guys have probably experienced this, and I hate that we live in a world where you have to. Um, but I'm also not going to trivialize what you go through just for the sake of teaching this when that's something you could speak to. Um, so, carrying on. This is where we're going back a little bit. Sorry, it's kind of out of order, but, it is. Social influence, how a person is affected by others and evidence in their behavior, emotions, and cognition. So this is what we talked about with sociology. You look at the group of people. With social psychology, you look at how the group membership, how the people around them change their attitudes and their feelings and the way they think. So, persuasion. Intentionally trying to make people change their attitudes and beliefs, which may lead to changes in behavior. Um, oh, you should use this product, or you should vote for this person. It's persuasion. And your goal will vary. Sometimes it'll be to make more money, sometimes it'll be to get someone elected. It depends on why you are trying to persuade people the way that you are. Obviously, money plays a very high factor in this. What I want to talk about more than anything with this is the Milgram experiments. So, talks about the difference between conformity, compliance, and obedience. Conformity is when you yield to a real or imagined pressure. I know you don't know me in real life, IRL, whatever. I don't like jeans. or pants, really. I'm kind of a leggings person. Um, but if I wear leggings to work, I can get fired. So, even though I don't like pants, I prefer leggings, I conform, which means I wear pants to work because that's what I have to do. It's a very real pressure. That's not imagined at all. They're very vocal about it. Not a real or imagined pressure. This is a very real pressure, and I have a dress code that I have to conform to. Um, Now, with this is kind of borderline between conformity and obedience because yes, there is a punitive aspect if I do not comply. Um, but conformity is trying to blend in. Um, and trying kind of yielding to the expectations of others. Compliance occurs when people yield to social pressures in their public behavior, even though their beliefs have not changed. So, I still like leggings. I will always like leggings. Can I wear them to work? No. Does that change how much I love them? Absolutely not. Still love them. But even though my attitude may not change about them, um, my actions have to. So, I'm sorry, guys. I just can't get comfortable today. Compliance. So, you don't change your opinion, but you may pretend like you are. Um, or, you kind of ignore it or put it to the side because people are not going to agree with it. And last but not least, obedience. This is the subject of Milgram's studies. Obedience is a form of compliance that occurs when people follow direct commands, usually from someone in a position of authority. So, what Milgram did, there's a video, it's on the next slide. He brought these people in, and he said, there's somebody on the other side, they're going to answer a question. If they answer wrong, you have to administer an electric shock. And, the more and more questions that they got wrong, the stronger and stronger the shock. And it was all fake. So don't worry. No participants were harmed in the making of this experiment. But it kind of seemed like there was, or at least that's what they were led to believe. And what he was doing was he was trying to see, if somebody in a position of authority, i.e. a doctor in a white lab coat, tells them to do something, are they going to do it? Even if it's morally wrong, because some of these shocks that they were supposed to be administering were considered lethal. Granted, there were no actual shocks, but they didn't know that. But yeah, and some people did it. And again, this kind of goes back to the whole Zimbardo thing. Don't confuse the two. I need you to remember that Milgram is shocks and Zimbardo is prison. Okay? But both of them are working off of the same kind of question. Are these people bad people, or are these good people put in a bad situation? Again, the video is on slide 10. Compliance tactics. I'm probably not going to test too much on these, but it is kind of nice to have this for real world application. So your foot in the door technique. Agreeing to one request will lead to further larger requests. So this is kind of like, you see gangsters kind of show up and say, hey, I just need a little favor. And then next thing you know, you wake up with a horse head in your bed. So you start out asking for little things, and then eventually those things get larger and larger, and that's the foot in the door technique. Your lowball technique, getting someone to commit to an attractive proposition before hidden costs are revealed. Think of timeshares, if anybody has experience with those. Like, oh yeah, 3 days, 4 nights, $99.99. What they don't tell you is that you have to spend 2 hours in a meeting, trying not to buy something. Another good one is cell phones, or something like that, or Comcast, Xfinity, stuff like that. They'll say, oh, get this service for $39.99. What they don't tell you is the cost of renting the device, taxes, service fees, stuff like that. And this thing that you thought was going to be $39.99 is now all of a sudden $76.42. I don't know, I just picked a number there, but you get the idea. It's way more, but they reel you in and they make you think, oh yeah, it's going to be this, and then no. And then during the face technique is, you're going to get told no, so you just shoot for the moon. Making a large request that you know may be rejected, but because that's been rejected, maybe you can ask for something more reasonable now and actually be able to get it. Um, okay, so groups and relationships. I'm going to hit on just a couple of these really quick. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not testing on these. I put these on here for you because you're going to have to do group projects and you're going to see these things way more than you'd like. Okay. Um, the big one that I want to talk about, I talked about diffusion of responsibility already. De-individuation. We talked a little bit about that already. Diminished sense of personal responsibility, inhibition, or adherence to social norms that occur when group members are not treated as individuals. Um, and this happens more often than we would like to admit, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. Um, Within the military, it happens. Um, your name doesn't matter. You're a soldier just like the person next to you. You are no different than the person to the left or the right of you. Are you different? Absolutely. You're a person. You're an individual. Um, but, for those intents and purposes, you are not. You are just another person. And that's de-individuation. No one is more important than anyone else. You are all equally good or bad, depending on the situation. Another example of that too was kind of what we talked about earlier with I forgot. Um with the prison. Same kind of deal. I've worked in a prison before. Are the prisoners different? Yes, absolutely. They're all people. But you begin to see them as the same. Because of their group membership. So, that just the losing of individuality is really what de-individuation is. The rest of these are again gonna talk more to group dynamics. This is one of those things I'm putting it in here for your benefit. You're gonna have to work with people that you're not gonna like. I promise you. These tactics make it a little less painful sometimes. So, social roles, Stanford Prison Experiments. We talked about that one already. Attraction and love. So, this talks about when we like people. And this is part of social psych. So, interpersonal attraction, the factors that lead us to form friendships and romantic relationships with others. Part of that is proximity, how close you are to them. We live in a technological world. I'm pretty close to you guys now. Never ever actually met some of you in person, but you see me, you watch these videos every week or every 2 weeks whenever I post them, so you have that exposure to me, and that's what proximity is all about. Speaking of exposure, mere exposure effect. My favorite example of this is Sheldon and Penny in The Big Bang Theory. Sheldon does not like Penny whenever they first start meeting, but he sees that she's going to be coming around more and more often, so Penny grows on him. That's the mere exposure effect. We kind of get stuck with a person, so it's in our best interest to like them. Another really good example is your best friend's boyfriend or girlfriend. You know that your best friend's going to be dragging them around with them, so you try and make an effort to genuinely like that person. And that's the mere exposure effect. Last but not least, Sternberg's triarchic theory of love. So you have, going along with that, talks about sexual orientation. First off, your preference for relationships, which we've already talked about. With Sternberg's triarchic theory, you're looking at 3 factors of love. So intimacy, passion, and commitment. And with Sternberg, he thought if you had all 3, that was like the best. That was as good as you could get. It's called consummate love. With each factor of 2, depending on the 2 factors that were involved, you had a different type of love. So romantic love was intimacy and passion. Companionate love is intimacy and commitment. And then fatuous love is passion and commitment. So fatuous love is kind of borderline obsessive love. It's very heated, it's very hot and passionate and steamy, and you're sticking together. Um, but you may not be overly close. You may not share personal details, things like that, because you're not very intimate. It's just a hot, sticky ride that you just kind of go with. Okay? Romantic love is intimacy and passion. Um, you don't know how long it's going to last because it's missing commitment, but, it's close and it's intense. And then companionate love, I tend to think of older couples with this. Um, it sounds wrong, especially now that I think about it, since it's missing passion. This is to say that older people do not experience passion. That is not the case. A lot of people do, but I don't think anybody really wants to think about that right now. Companionate love is intimacy and commitment. So knowing someone really well and sticking it out and seeing things through. And again, all three is called consummate love. And that is chapter 13. Um, I told you guys there was going to be a lot in this one. There is. 15 is probably going to be just as jam packed, probably more so actually. Um, so I'm going to go take a break and drink the rest of my monster and come back in a minute and finish up. I hope everyone's having a great weekend. I'm going to be finishing up the exam probably later on tonight and posting the study guide. I'm hoping by tomorrow. But yeah, that is where we are, and I hope all is well. If you need anything, let me know.